All right, well, it doesn't look like that many more people are filtering in at this point, so my co-hosts agree, we might go ahead and get started.
Yeah.
All right, great. So welcome everybody to the Assess What's Important and Creating Assessments That Show How Students Use Their Knowledge workshop as a part of the 4DEE workshop bonanza today on July 20th as a part of the ESA 2020 conference. We will be working in small groups today later on in breakout sessions, and I've been told that many of you who have participated in a few of the other previous workshops have been doing this as well, so hopefully everybody's familiar, but if not, we'll give some instruction later on. And hopefully people have been introducing themselves in the chat if you haven't already met some of your colleagues, but otherwise, if you're sort of coming in now, please introduce yourself, your institution or school, and sort of the general level of students that you teach or ecology students. All right, Jennifer, next slide. Oh, so it's my honor to introduce the facilitation team here today. So we have Diane Ebert-May, who is a distinguished professor at Michigan State University. Diane, if you want to give a wave, I'm sure everybody knows who you are, but. And then we also have Jennifer Doherty, a teaching professor from University of Washington. If you want to give a little wave. Yeah. And then myself, Amanda Sorensen, I am a communication and outreach specialist at Michigan State University. And then we also have Luanna Prevost, who is associate professor at University of South Florida. And then our wonderful tech wizard, Jessica, up there, Jessica Johnson. So, all right, so let's move right along into some of the good content. Diane will be introducing our first question.
Okay, first clicker question. You'd be disappointed if you didn't have one. So you'll see this poll. You should see this poll on your screen. And basically what you want to think about is, in your experience, whether or not you've taught introductory courses, what % of a student's final grade is based on exams and quizzes in general? What your experience or somebody else's? Give a click. What % of a final grade is based on high stakes exams and quizzes?
I see the poll.
Yeah, I see that 1%. Okay. So you're just telling, look at the final exam. Show me your final exam. What %?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that count for in your grade? Here we go. No. Oh, this is pretty cool. Don't copy. All right.
Can someone out there who's taking the poll just tell us where you clicked for it? So I think that there's a polling on that Zoom bar. There's a little thing that says polling, and there's a histogram, and they pop up. So did that help, Kathleen? Hopefully.
Oh, so we have to answer both 1 and 2 to submit. Okay, you have to do both. Okay, so that's good. And so can you see the second one? We'll go back and forth. Yeah. The second one then is also about the proportion of assessments you use in your introductory STEM or ecology courses. It doesn't matter. But what % of those assessment items should demonstrate students' problem solving and higher cognitive thinking? Should be, not are you doing, but should be. In our
aspirational blue sky assessment.
Absolutely. Okay, I can see, so I can scroll back and forth and see these data. Nice. Okay, I see. Thank you, Caitlin. All right.
Okay. So about 96% of people have voted. What do you think, Diane?
So a couple comments here. So the first question about your experience, the final grade. This workshop's all about assessing students. And you can see in general,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but would you like to share the results with people?
Oh, duh. Okay, now I am. There we go. So in general, most of you thinking about 50%, if you look at that thing, of a grade in your course, and some of you higher, based on exams and quizzes. All right, so think about the weight. A student comes to Michigan State University with a grade in ecology, and you got a B, I could say, show me your final exams, and I can learn about what performance expectations you had in that course, because a huge chunk of your grade was based on exams and quizzes. So that's one of them. The second one is the should. So the group is saying that, 50% or more of those assessment items on a student's high stakes exam, which counts for their grade, should demonstrate students' problem solving skills, their ability to think, higher level thinking cognitively, and we should then be able to look at those exams and see items that actually demonstrate that. So that's what you think, and what we do know from the literature and some of the research that my group has done is that, in fact, that's not the case. The majority of final exam and midterm exam questions are very low cognitive level questions on a study that Jenny Mommsen published a number of years ago. And the real goal then is, if we want to demonstrate problem solving and critical thinking, we gotta write the test items. So in other words, if you don't test what's important, what you test becomes important. It's the famous line said by somebody from the University of Pittsburgh. So today we're going to be looking at, how do you design assessments that really reveal higher cognitive function. Sorry, we've got dogs. All right, that's good. So next slide, there we go.
Okay, great. So I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about this. So when we say assess what's important, what you're assessing will become important. Well, what should we assess? And I know we talk about this in our universities, and we also have some national reports that have come out to talk about what are the important things for students to be able to learn. And so in 2011, Carol Brewer and colleagues developed this report called Vision and Change, a call to action, which you probably have heard of. And if you haven't, Google it. It's really a really great read. But the idea there, they talked about how there are at least 2 dimensions of things we want students to learn. There are these cross-cutting core concepts in biology, but also the core practices of science, the core competencies they call them. And we really want students to learn both of these things and be able to integrate them together. Around that same time, there was a conversation going around about, well, what should K-12 students learn about science? And they also decided that we were looking for something multidimensional, not just a bunch of concepts and then a bunch of scientific practices or like the scientific method separately, but that there were integrating these things were very important. And they also added the idea of, not only did they have core ideas, they had practices, but they also added the idea of the cross-cutting concept across all the different sciences. There are major themes that students should know. And from that conversation about the NRC framework came this report, Practices, Cross-Cutting Concepts, and Core Ideas Across All K-12 Science. And so just some more words about that, because that 3-dimensional report is where we got, really we jumped off of for the 4DEE framework in ecology and having 4 dimensions. Right. So one thing that we can use, right, from this 3D learning that they were doing in K-12 is a project that Diane was a part of, and you can see the citations down there. I think my screen is cutting off. Does anybody else see any citations down there for Laverty? Yeah, okay, great. So what can we do? How can we take this thinking about 3 dimensions in K-12 into college, right? How can we engage faculty in discussions to build consensus on key issues? You're only seeing the NRC right below at Laverty? No? No? Okay, well, we could put it in the, yeah, it's down pretty low. Okay. All right, so what are the core ideas in your discipline? We'll get that in the chat. What are the scientific practices that are important? And then what are the cross-cutting concepts that make connections across disciplines, across physics, chemistry, biology? And so this sort of work going from K-12 has been brought into the college by, several different groups, but most importantly here, by Laverty et al. And a group at Michigan State who's trying to bring the K-12 discussions to our faculty. So the result, right, is hopefully three-dimensional learning. It's not isolated knowledge, not like, oh, I know I can memorize some stuff about core ideas. Oh, and I know the path through the scientific method. But it's this really interdimensional, interlocked learning where you can use all of this knowledge together to really explain a complex phenomena. And so Diane, do you want to, oh, there it is. It's a little higher. Great. The citation there, hopefully you can see it. And Diane, if you want to just take them through this slide.
Okay. Got the citation? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So what we have to deal with the disciplinary core ideas, when you assess important things. Those are the core ideas of your discipline. There are lots of ancillary information about that, and the discipline decides. So ecologists decide what the important concepts are that students need to know, but importantly, go to the next one, the fundamental ideas, and go to the next one, please, Jessica, or Jennifer, one more. Is what do we want students to do? What do we want students to do with that knowledge? So knowledge without doing something with it is pretty useless, except on Tuesday night trivia night in the bars. And we can't do that anymore. So I think the interesting thing is, what do you want the students to know and be able to do with the ideas, if indeed there's a cross-cutting concept that is very difficult in most curriculum that we have. The chemists complain about the biologists complain about the chemists, the physicists don't even talk to us. And so the question is, can we integrate across disciplines some of the core ideas? And certainly things in ecology that are meaningful, and we'll give you an example in a second, are things like energy and matter. Energy and matter cuts across all three disciplines, but it's really the core concept decided by the disciplinarians and the practices. What do you want students to know to do with that information? Those are the two key elements. And if you do have a cross-cutting concept, that's a bonus, because students may be able to connect your course to other courses, not in ecology. Okay. So I gave it, yeah, there you go.
Perfect. So I know this is the third workshop of the day, and I won't belabor this too long, but pulling from sort of the previous work that's been done by the NRC and Diane's work and some of the other work coming out of MSU in other areas where they're thinking about in the disciplines of biology and chemistry, what are these core concepts and how are we meaningfully assessing and teaching these core concepts to students? There was an effort a number of years ago, as per sort of Alan Berkowitz's introduction. Hopefully everybody got a chance to look through that video, of developing sort of these core ideas of what is a comprehensive ecology education. And what came from that was this 4DEE ecology education framework, where we have these core ecology concepts, these ecological practices, human environment interactions, and cross-cutting themes. So these 4 dimensions and how they interplay and the elements within those dimensions of what makes, a truly comprehensive ecological education, and what should somebody know if they are ecologically literate. So next slide. Oh, okay. Perfect. Okay, so when we're thinking about this, really what we're fundamentally asking is, how are we transforming assessments to make student thinking more visible? So if we're transforming our teaching, how are we transforming our assessments? And the reason we want to do multi-dimensional assessment is because we want to be able to see our students able to really grapple with some of the complexity of the multiple interactions between the dimensions and the elements. And if you have, assessments that really your data from those assessments aren't telling you anything about the complexity of thinking about the students are doing about these ecological concepts, it's not very useful. So next slide, please. Many of you are probably very familiar with the idea from Wiggins and colleagues, this backward design idea, where instead of sort of thinking about the activities and moving towards assessment, we're really thinking about our goals and objectives for students and the outcomes that we want them to have, and then moving towards, our next slide, moving towards determining the acceptable evidence. So what is evidence of the students being successful in these goals or objectives that we've set out for them? And then next slide. And then fundamentally from there, designing a learning experience or instructional experience that fulfills the opportunity for students to get to those goals or objectives. Next slide. So we are going to do a quick breakout session for 5 minutes where individuals are going to go to groups. And you all be talking about how will you prepare your students to do well on authentic assessments that differ from what you currently use. So we'll post the question into the chat and we'll sort of broadcast it out to everybody, but this is the core question that we hope conversations sort of revolve around. So Jessica is going to go ahead. Jessica is going to go ahead and assign the breakout rooms, and you all will be hopefully talking in a few minutes with your colleagues.
I think the idea here is that if you're going to make an assessment that's three-dimensional, that includes practices and content combined, how will you prepare your students differently so they can really succeed?
All right, it looks like everybody's back in the room here.
Cool.
So just sort of to hopefully you had some productive conversations with everybody in your breakout rooms. So I think Jennifer has kindly offered to call on people, but hopefully we have some volunteers. Right. If anybody wants to share out from their groups what they discussed as briefly as a part of their conversations from these past 5 minutes. If you want to raise your hand or unmute yourself and pop in.
Yeah, please raise your hand virtually in the participants option so that we can collect everyone.
Unmute you. Yep. Oh, all right.
Okay, we have Nathan. Would you like to start?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I thought that this was really productive for 5 minutes to hear about some of the different kinds of authentic assessments other than a typical exam. But we didn't get a chance to really talk into how we're preparing students to do well on those assessments. And I'm really interested to hear more about that as the event proceeds. I think I saw some other people in chat who had a similar feeling. So yeah, thanks.
Anne?
Yeah, well, I have students work in teams and do application exercises, and the stakes are pretty low there. And then there'll be a similar problem like that on the exam. And what I've been wondering about is if I should have, I mean, I do try to really scaffold the application exercise that they do, but still I wonder if I should have more of a rubric for it. I mean, there is a motivation. I do post a key later and hoping at some point, you know, they'll really pull it together before the exam.
But what would be, Anne, what would be one of your objectives for doing that in class? What's a learning, where you're doing the practice for this in class? What's the learning objective?
Well, the learning objectives are usually for them to integrate the information they've been learning, apply it in a real world situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I would expect to see on your assessments a question exactly like that. Not one that they practice in class, but one around an important concept that they'll do. And this is a tool that I think will help you design those, and you can decide then, based on the data from your students, the formative, as you're doing the active learning in class, you're gonna know where they got stuck or where they're getting stuck or where they already know this, so move on. Right. So that's your formative assessment as you're doing these activities. That will enable you then to predict how they're going to do on the new one of those problems on the exam. And that will help you determine what scaffolding you need. Okay. Right?
Yeah.
Yep, good.
Thank you. Linda.
Yes, hello. So we talked about how we might look at data in the class and make predictions or analyze data or read primary literature in the classroom and then put an abstract and ask questions about the variables or the next steps in the experiment. But we also did talk about how that takes a lot of time to grade. So you can only do so much of that. It'd be interesting to hear about other kinds of assessments besides putting these sort of long answer questions on an exam.
And Linda, what is the format of the answer? Is it text?
Yeah, it's written. So like
It's
what,
written text.
what experiment would you do next? Or
Yeah.
what are some, problems with this experiment or that kind of
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah, we can eliminate paragraphs of text. So, I mean, and I'm with you. I understand.
Yep,
We can't,
yep.
this is not a quick fix pill, but there are
Yeah.
structures of assessments that we can do that don't involve 2 pages per kid. I don't have time to do that.
Kennedy.
Yes, thank you. So the quick summary that comes to my mind is laboratory and field experiences. Those give students a lot of opportunity to collaborate and interact with their instructor. And then often when I give exams, I will give conceptual and procedural questions related to those activities. That those questions don't simply ask the students to summarize, but rather ask them to apply concepts and procedures in a different context. And I give the students a limited number of those because, as some of you noted already, they do take longer to grade.
How large is your course, Kennedy?
I'm specifically referencing a limnology course I teach in the fall, which has about 15 students. It's pretty small. Rather than using an answer key for a lot of those types of questions, I will grade them individually, and I will provide a grade, but I also provide individualized feedback, often targeting misconceptions.
Okay.
All right. And then I just want to check in. Do you have time for more? People are very excited to share right now, Amanda and Diane. So I just want to know if you had any more time.
What do we have, Amanda?
We need half hour. We could probably take about 1 or 2 more.
Great. Okay, Carla, E.
Yeah, I would describe I would summarize our discussion, our group also as being largely about the difficulties of preparing students for assessments that assess quite complicated skills. I think for me personally, the challenge is often figuring out what are the components of those skills, because often you give them practice on one problem, you give them a novel problem, and you'll realize once you see their answers that there are a bunch of difficulties in that novel problem that you didn't realize were there, that weren't in the original problem.
Yeah. And that's where the scaffolding comes in that Anne was referring to earlier. I mean, you would have never, the beauty of that, Carla, is you would have never known that had you not given that type of problem. So now you're getting this feedback, and guess what's going to happen in this whole process? You're going to have to do more with less. So in other words, ecology, we have a lot of biology. We have more pages in all of our books than any chemist and physicist has, because we have so much knowledge. And what's really happening is that we're condensing. For years, our course, 25% of the quote unquote content is gone. But we're doing much more with the big ideas and less with the trivia that the students can actually look up. So it's trade-offs, right? Good old ecological principle that you're gonna do trade-offs. If you have to go back, if what you're doing is so important, Carla, then you have to go back if 75% of your students are stuck. Or why go on? So you may do less in the course, but you will do more with the less. And I think that, that's the trade-offs that we have to start making with our curriculum.
Right.
So
And our
unfortunately,
comment. Oh, okay. By
No,
no,
go
by no
ahead.
one. No. Okay. Gerardo, are you here?
I'm here. Hi, folks.
All right.
Sorry,
Hi.
I arrived late. Well, we didn't really get to what we do to prepare, but I guess from my experience, what I've been doing is essentially doing these online quizzes after every other lecture, so to kind of gauge where the students are at, and then we discuss the answers as well. So this helps kind of pushing the direction where we need to go, or kind of like Diane suggests, is that you're not necessarily going to get through everything, but if there are difficulties and it's a key concept that requires more time and no one's getting, you can find that out or ferret it out with these online quizzes. And I find that because they are anonymous, like, you get your students to put up handles online and so forth, so you don't really know who's responding. But it takes away that pressure of, oh, the prof is asking me. So I find anyways that these quizzes are a good way to gauge where your students are at, and then using that information, create quizzes or exams that well, are more effective in many ways.
Yeah. But it all depends on what the nature of the online quizzes is.
Whoa,
Are they?
this lead-in between what Gerardo just said and then what Diane and Amanda want to say next is just beautiful, right? Let's look at the nature of those quizzes.
Yeah. What are you asking them to do online?
Thank you very much.
Okay. I think we're going forward, Jennifer.
Nope.
Okay. So this is the segue. And so just think to yourself, obviously, if we were all together, this would be more fun, but actually it's fun the way it is. So what kind of thinking, I want you to think about, what kind of thinking are you asking students to do with this item? This was an item pulled right off of an ecology exam. So think about that. And if there's a quick person, just jump in, unmute and jump in and tell us, what are we asking? What kind of thinking, what kind of cognitive demand are we asking students? Or in your own words, what do you have to do to get this right?
Memorize.
There you go. Thank you very much, Carrie. I mean, it's just, you're memorizing, it's one dimension. It's not that it's unimportant. Yes, we want our students to know the difference between producers, consumers, and decomposers. But this is a very one-dimensional kind of thing. So now let's imagine you wanted to make this a multi-dimensional multiple choice question. So in this workshop, we're going to do both. We're going to do what we call in our research selected response and constructed response. So because selected response can be more than just multiple choice. But all right, so go to the next one. Okay. There's a multiple choice item, and the tool we will give you at the end will teach you how to make these. So here's a statement by a news reporter. The wood produced by an oak tree comes primarily from the nutrients and water in the soil. This is the classic. If you saw Janet Batsley's and my paper in bioscience, this is the radish problem for those of you who have found that and used it. But anyhow, the wood is produced. Do you agree with this statement? So yes, no, the wood is made out of carbon that comes from the ground. No, the wood is mostly made out of carbon that comes from the air. So not only do we have the yes, no choice, we have their reasoning, that telling me why yes, why no. Here's a third one. Yes, it's made out of nitrogen and it comes from the ground. And this is revealing all sorts of student thinking here. And number 4 is no, the wood's made out of nitrogen. So this is a scientific practice that we claim in our research. This is an evaluation of that statement because you've given a reporter scenario. Now you're evaluating the science in that scenario. Is it true? I disagree, I don't disagree, and why? The thing that most multiple choice questions are missing and constructed responses is the student's reasoning. Why do you think this? This is what will inform you, teacher, and will inform our students where their thinking's at and what do we have to work more on or less on. All right, so that would be a multi-dimensional, what we claim in the context of this workshop, multi-dimensional multiple choice question. So you could take that when we break out today. You could take, if you have a question that looks very single dimensional, later on today, you can take that and try to turn this into another one. All right, so now let's go to the next one, Jennifer. Okay, now, in order to do that though, you have to have, and I asked Anne way back when, a few minutes ago, what are the learning objectives that you have? So you have to write learning objectives so that all of your assessment items, the items on the test, you can fit into a learning objective. In other words, the last thing you want to do is trick students. Students are skeptics. They're saying, is this going to be on the test? Why is this on the test? Well, it's on the test because you have a learning objective and all the items I'm making fit into a learning objective. All right, so you take your core concept, and I would argue the last 2 problems will do it. It's energy and matter, right? I mean, you could talk about that. And the scientific practice, and you write in your learning objective, students will be able to evaluate scientific claims about carbon cycling. Bam, there's lots of ways you can do that. All right, Next one, Jennifer. All right, so here's that same idea, again, using the systems concept from vision and change, and also from our 4DEE in ESA. Pathways and transformation of energy is a big concept, okay? And so are systems. So you take the concept of ecosystems, you take the scientific practice of modeling. And again, this workshop's all going to be about modeling because Tammy Long and I and all of my buddies, I mean, we teach total model-based courses and so forth. So here's the learning objective. Model the flow of carbon through an ecosystem and use the model. See, you can memorize the first part, but now you've got to use it to predict the consequences of increased temperature on primary productivity. If our students all leave our courses doing that, I'm going to cheer. This is going to be good. And I'm not going to quit till they do. So you guys have a lot of work to do. I'll be like RBG in my 90s still doing this. All right, next. So here's the case. I'm going to show you how we built a 3-dimensional constructed response, but I'm also going to get to your concern. How in the hell am I going to grade this? Okay, because I have 250 kids in ecology. All right, we use the literature. This is, I think Lars Budwig found this one. So here's global warming and the effect on the Arctic food web. I happen to be an alpine ecologist, so I'm very biased to systems like this. We give the students a scenario, a case, okay? We have the Arctic Ocean and so forth, and you will have access to this, okay? And we give them, we give them all the players because they've never seen this before. This is a brand new case from the literature, the citation that we showed you. We practice cases like this in class, but not this case. So they're into a new system. Here are the learning objectives for which this assessment is aligned, I claim. Model and interpret movements of matter and energy through ecosystems. Okay, what are they doing? They're modeling and interpreting. Okay. What are they doing? Matter and energy. You got it, man. Whatever you want to do there. 2, relate the trophic structure of ecosystems to the movement of matter and energy. And I've seen so many exams where they say, the 10% rule from producers to consumers, blah, 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 blah. But now we're doing a little bit more than that. And then predict. So we're modeling, we're relating, or explaining, we're predicting the biotic and abiotic factors that influence primary productivity. So in our ecology unit, even in introductory biology, these are typical objectives for which many assessments can fit. And we're not gonna, all right, got it? Okay, next. Okay, so here's the assessment now. So there are 2 parts to this because we already gave you the scenario about the Arctic ecosystem. Okay, draw a species interaction model. Many of you teach species interaction models with pluses and minuses and knots next to the species name. That's all fine and good. So now you're checking, do they know the difference between producers, consumers, decomposers in the case? So now they have a new scenario, they have who eats whom into there. That would be a good question, but it's not multidimensional until we do part 2. So then 2. Now, you got your web. Predict what will happen if you you eliminate polar bears. Now they're doing something with their model. So they eliminate polar bears and predict how primary productivity may be affected and explain your reasoning. So let's go, Jennifer, go back 1. Let's talk about the grading thing here. This is easy to grade. We have 250, 300, this is easy. There are no words here, there are models. And even with large numbers, you can grade this, and you can even ask them to write a figure legend under here so they think about what's the purpose of this model. All right, that's easy grading. It's just, there's lots of it. If you have 250, I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can do about that. Next. So go that now for this one, they're eliminating this. All they're saying is primary productivity is either go up, stay the same, or go down, and why. That's a phrase. Okay, that's you can limit students to up, down, increase, decrease, stay the same, and this is why. And they can do that in a very clear, thoughtful sentence if in fact they have a decent species interaction model in part 2. how much of our exam would something like this, what's the value of this as a problem on an exam? Oh, this is at least, and we don't do total percentages, but this is, a good 10 or 15 points if you want it to be, and how much time is this going to take them? A fair bit. They could probably do 10 bad multiple choice questions in the same amount of time. I don't care. I'm going to find out if they've gotten LJ eating whales, and they don't get the primary productivity part. So that's part 2. Make sense? Do we have any questions coming in? Like, yeah, these slides will be made available, George. Okay. Anything?
Next slide.
Okay, yeah.
Next slide. And now I believe Amanda.
Yep.
Okay.
So in the 4DEE framework, we don't quite have a tool to assess these types of assessments yet, but there is the 3D lab tool, which allows us to start thinking about, generating multidimensional assessments. And so when we're thinking about that in the 3D lab tool, you'll have to put in your own core concepts, but you can use sort of the principles from the 3D lab tool to evaluate your assessments. So looking from the 3D lab tool, this is pulled from the 3D lab tool from the developing and using models, the constructed response section for the evaluation. So the first one is the question gives an event, observation, or phenomena for the student to explain or make predictions about. And so from the, go ahead, Jennifer. From the assessment that Diane showed to us, we can say, yes, the species interactions in the Arctic Ocean food web. So we meet that, that metric. So we can move on to the next 3D lab metric. So question gives a representation or asks students to construct a representation. So if we look at our previous example, Jennifer, next slide. Beautiful. We can say, yes, students create a species interaction model. Next. So third, question asks students to explain or make a prediction about the event, observation, or phenomena. Next. So we could say, yes, it asks the students to predict what would happen if polar bears were eliminated and predict how primary productivity would be affected. Next. And then question asks students to provide the reasoning that links the representation to their explanation or prediction. So we can say, yes, the question did ask to have students explain their reasoning. So this is just an example of how you can use the metrics or that are outlined in the 3D lab tool to evaluate your own assessment questions. And this 3D lab tool will be in the resources section at the bottom of your individual group documents in the breakout rooms when we go to the breakout sessions.
Amanda, can I just interrupt for a sec?
Go right ahead.
So in our tool here, and again, we made this tool because none of us ever learned how to make assessments in graduate school. That's not what we did. I don't know, we just didn't learn that. This is for a constructed response. Those of you who have to give multiple choice questions due to the volume or the great number of students you have to deal with or not, we have the same thing for a selected response. But the difference in that, you will see from the tool, you have to make all the representations for the students to choose. So you, for example, would put in 4 species interaction models, and you're doing a lot of the thinking for the students, but I understand. But again, something, high stakes like this is going to tell you a whole lot about a lot of concepts in ecology, but we have that there for you too. So you can do it. We can do this if it's multiple choice, if it's, well, I don't know, constructed response. So you will not be grading the rest of your life. You will be getting, though, remarkable data about your students' abilities. Okay, Amanda.
Yep.
All right, Amanda.
You have to go to the next slide. There you go. So we are going to do some breakout sessions. And we are going to have individuals, again, assigned to the breakout rooms. And so you join similarly the same way you did last time. We're going to post a document on the here in the chat, and we'll have Jessica broadcast it out to everybody. In that document, you are going to go to your assigned groups working document. And so you'll see there's a couple instructions on top. You'll click the working document for your group number. Your group number is going to be sort of up on top of your bar there. Go to your group's document, and then you can start working on that document, and you basically just follow the instructions straight through in that document. Brilliant. And I see Jennifer and Luanna have posted it in the chat now, so if you can access the document now. And so you're going to follow the instructions, and then at the end, about 2 to 3 minutes before we wrap up, we would like for the group to pick one assessment question, so the objective and the assessment item that you've developed, and put it in the yellow highlighted text section. And so we're going to do a bit of a share out at the end, and have share out a couple questions and have us discuss those questions and how we can improve them, or what are ways that we can develop those questions even further. So if your group would like to share, please put those questions in that section in the document. I think, do we have any other directions, or are we?
I think the real key here, depending on who's in your group, you could certainly work with one question, all 4 of you, or each of you take a question. But again, the A, B, C, D, E here is, think about the scenarios. You have no idea how many scenarios I've seen on multiple choice questions that have nothing to do with the answer. Students don't even read them. They go right to what the question is and what the choices are. So you need a relevant thing. That's where a lot of information can be that the students need to use. And then think about, modeling is just not boxes and arrows. Modeling, you're all scientists, you're all ecologists, you understand. You can make pictures, you can make drawings. We use box and arrow models in our research and with our students because it's got a very strong theoretical basis. It's structure, behavior, function modeling out of computer science, but as long as you teach your students how to make the models you want them to do, you're good to go. And it's really important when you have students make a model, all models must have a function. You know that. So look at the model and what is this model telling me? And when students, because they can make a drawing that has no function whatsoever. But what is this model telling me? And then again, the other things we already did about explaining and making prediction, and why. Why do you predict XX from the model? So, among the 4 of you in your groups, you may have fun working on 1, you may have fun working on 4, you may have to change, go back and ask yourself a question, why do I ask this question? You might have to ratchet it up a little bit in terms of, and your colleagues are certainly capable, you're all capable of doing this. It's more of a matter of getting some practice in. So you can do it, and I look forward to seeing what's up.
So just before Jessica sends everybody off, if your group has an issue, please use the ask for help function again on the bottom of your bar. But there's only 4 of us to go around, so we will be jumping into groups as individuals come and ask for help. So use the resources there that are in the document as much as possible, and we will try to make our way around. So go ahead.
Do we want to do 25 minutes?
Sure. Yep. That'd be great.
Okay. All right, I'm going to open all rooms. You may not be in the same room that you were before, so please pay attention to which room you go into, because that's which link you will click on. All right, here we go.